Hello, my treasures. It's time for some more Showdown in Badlands cards to be reviewed. Today we will be covering the Demon Hunter, remaining Hunter cards, some Mage, and Rogue. So let's begin. Alright, let's start with the Rogue Excavating package. The first card is going to be Drilly the Kid, a reference to Billy the Kid, a 4-cost 4 attack 3 HP mech. Battlecry, Quickdraw, Death Rattle, Excavate, a treasure, and the treasure for Excavation, the Azurite Scorpion, a 4-cost 5 attack 5 HP elemental beast. Battlecry, get 4 random spells. If you've excavated 8 times, they cost 0. This is a great card for Thief Rogue. I would be very much curious to see maybe a Thief Control Rogue deck form around cards like this, just because of the fact that one of the later cards we'll be going over also acts as a very good control tool for that style of deck. Something that Rogue historically has always been missing and should make it interesting new type of Rogue deck. The only thing about Azurite Scorpion is you have to actually excavate 8 times, but because this card has the Battlecry and Death Rattle and Quick Draw effect, you should be able to get the excavating off multiple times using things like Shadow Step and Break Dance. Now for the next card, which is going to be their Antique Flinger, a 4-cost 5 attack 4 HP minion. Battlecry, if you've excavated twice, destroy an enemy minion. This is what I meant by really good control tools for Excavate Rogue, in combination with Thief Rogue that can historically get a lot of control tools from other classes that they normally don't have access to. The deck might be a little bit tight on space, but this is probably a pretty good card for Rogue generally speaking. And now for the last excavating card that we've seen so far, Blood Rocco Shovel, a 1-cost 1 attack 3 durability weapon that has the Death Rattle, Excavate, a treasure. This is probably not the worst trigger for excavating a treasure. It isn't going to be instantly destroyed with things like the 1-cost elemental, if I remember right. That has to actually be a Death Rattle minion, but this card could see some play just because it is a pretty decent turn 1 or turn 2 play. Now let's get onto the next Rogue card, which is going to be Triple Sevens, a 7-cost spell that deals 7 damage to a minion. Draw 7 cards. 99% of the time, drawing 7 cards is probably really bad. For 7 mana, this isn't the worst just because we do have Trickster in rotation right now, but once that card rotates out with the new rotation, aka next set, this card will be a lot less playable than it currently is. This could easily be compared to Ultimate Infestation, except it doesn't give you anybody on board and can only target opponent's minions. The reason why I said earlier that it is bad to draw 7 cards, most of the time you're going to be burning a card if you do something like that. But again, if you need to refill your hand in something like a Miracle Rogue deck, this could be a card that you want to include with maybe 1 or 2 Tricksters in order to always have it discounted to 0 mana. Now for the other half of the Rogue cards, Stick Up is the first card, a 1-cost spell that discovers a Quick Draw card from another class. We've seen quite a few really good Quick Draw cards. This could easily see some play in a Thief Rogue deck. Sure, you're not always going to get the additional Quick Draw ability off of something like Tess, but it should still be pretty decent, especially because Thief Rogue has historically been missing something for 1 mana, and this is a great turn 1 play. Now for the next card, which is Shell Game, a 3-cost spell that get a random epic, rare, and common card from other classes. Again, really great for Thief Rogue, something that gives a lot of advantage to that deck. Now for the next one, Bounty Wrangler, a 3-cost 3 attack 4 HP minion. Quick Draw or combo, get a coin. Coins are always deadly within Rogue, which means this card will probably see play. It is low enough to include this in a Miracle style deck. The majority of your deck to slam down something like the Gravestone in order to slam down a huge minion on an early on turn. It also is worth mentioning the Quick Draw and combo effects do not stack, so you won't be getting 2, but because this is just an easily abusable card with things like Shadow Step, I can't see a world where this doesn't see play. Now for the next card, which is Dart Throw, a 2-cost spell that throws 2 damage darts at random enemy minions. If both hit the same minion, get a coin. more mana cheat, or at least coin generation for Rogue. I'm curious if we'll see some type of coin legendary for Rogue, since I know the second legendary for Rogue hasn't been revealed yet. And honestly, this would fit into that idea pretty easily. Maybe we'll see the return of Galliwax just because he is a big named goblin, and we're seeing a lot of goblins in these artworks. Overall, I think this is probably one of the worst cards for Rogue, generally speaking, that they got in the set, but it could easily be abusable in the right deck, depending on what the other legendary is going to be. Now for the last epic, this is going to be Wishing Well, a 5 cost, 0 attack, 7 HP minion. After you played a coin, get a random legendary minion from another class, and set its cost to 1. I mean, I guess we don't need a legendary to make Coin Rogue work. This is the perfect card for the deck. However, it does cost 5, which means it's going to be a little bit harder to actually fulfill. I honestly don't know if only having 3 coin generations is enough to make something like Wishing Well strong enough to see a lot of play. There are also a lot of legendaries currently in standard that only really work in whatever deck they were originally meant to be printed in. So there is a high likelihood of you just generating something that you can't easily use. But it does look like a lot of fun and could be a really funny day 1 rogue deck to try out. Now let's talk about the remaining Hunter cards, or at least the majority of the remaining Hunter cards. The first one is going to be Star Shooter, a 4 cost 2 attack, 3 durability weapon. After your hero attacks, get an Arcane Shot. And the Arcane Shot is the stereotypical classic Arcane Shot of dealing 2 damage for 1 mana. However, if you slam this down early enough before you slam down some of the other Arcane synergy that does exist in Hunter currently, then you'll be able to buff this up to either 3 damage, 4 damage, 5 damage, so on and so forth, making it actually really good for a Arcane Hunter deck. That deck was already running a few weapons. You could also fit in Shock Spitter as an additional way to deal direct damage to your opponent's face. I still think this one will probably see a lot of play just because Arcane Hunter is already really strong. And now some cards for the buff Hunter deck that we've been seeing. Bovine Skeleton is a 3 cost 3 attack 3 HP undead beast. Death Rattle, if this has 4 or more attack, summon a Bovine Skeleton. In theory, it can go infinite. If you're using things like Hope of Quel'The Lost or the next card that we'll be going over, you have easy ways to actually buff this up to 4 attack. So it should be able to be revived quite easily on the board, and it is a really good sticky minion for that style of deck, which is something that it was kind of missing. I think this is going to be a pretty decent card. And now for the next card, which is going to be Camouflage Mount, a 4 cost spell that gives a minion +3/+3 a random bonus effect. Whenever it dies, summon a chameleon with the bonus effect. And the bonus effects essentially are the same bonus effects that we've been seeing throughout the entire year. They're things like All Amalgam Ban. Now, this card, if you randomly generate Wind Fury on this is going to be incredibly strong. Generally, when I first saw this card, I didn't really think it would see too much play, but because it does have the possibility of giving something like King Crush Wind Fury, it might end up seeing some type of play since there are ways to cheat out King Crush. Overall, probably a pretty decent card for a buff Hunter deck. Alright, the final Hunter card is 10 Gallon Hat, a 2 cost spell. Draw a minion, give it a +1/+1 death rattle, get a 10 Gallon Hat. Now, the person who revealed this is the community manager Ridiculous Hat, so it fits in with his theme. It also is a reference to another Hearthstone dev who it goes by Gallon. Overall, this card looks pretty decent. It's basically an infinite resource in theory, where you can keep on drawing cards from your deck as long as you have more and more minions, which makes it actually pretty decent in my opinion, just because it is another way to search out key minions from your deck, or just be able to get a lot of advantage for some of the other cards that require you to buff them up by 1 additional attack. Starting off with Demon Hunter's Highlander card, which is Gunslinger Kurtrus, a 5 cost 4 attack 6 HP minion that has the battle cry: if your deck has no duplicates, fire 6 random 2 damage shots at enemy minions in their hand. This will allow you to remove key minions from your opponent's hand, especially given the fact that a lot of decks right now are centered around one or two really key minions and a lot of spells. That has been shifting a little bit since the Yogg nerf, but this should be really good against some matchups such as Rainbow Mage or any other deck that relies on just one minion. This is one of the Highlander cards. While it looks really bad on paper, I could see this in a lot of play just because of how much hand control can actually matter in the long run. Speaking of hand control, Pocket Sand is the next card, which is a 2-cost spell that deals 3 damage. Quickdraw, your opponent's next card costs 1 more. Demon Hunter has a very consistent way to draw into a lot of cards in a given turn while also discounting them through the relic package. This card probably could see some play just because it is 3 damage to do to either your opponent's face or to one of their minions. Sure, it doesn't have a fail tag, making it a little bit worse for wild, but honestly, just being able to increase the cost of one card in your opponent's hand is actually pretty good. But if we want to talk about more damage that we can do to our opponent's board, Fan the Hammer, a 4-cost spell that deals 6 damage split among the lowest health enemies. Basically, how this card is going to be working is every time it does 1 damage, it'll recalculate which one has the lowest HP. If you are using this on an empty board where your opponent only has themselves up, then it's just going to do 6 damage to your opponent's face. Essentially the same amount of mana for a fireball. However, that is going to be a little less consistent. Overall, while I think the memes of this card are quite fun, I don't think this one will probably see too much play. Now for some draw power for Demon Hunter. Bartendo Bot, a 2-cost 3-attack 1 HP mech. Battlecry, draw an outcast card, slide it to the left side of your hand. No longer are you going to draw into something like Skull of Gul'dan and have to try when you can't instantly get the outcast off. This is great for wild, however in standard I don't know how many of these outcast cards you're actually going to be worried about not instantly playing once you do draw into it. Because this card does only cost 2, most of the outcast cards in standard at least are easily playable right afterwards. However, if you are only running a few key outcast cards, this could consistently draw you into these, such as Tough Crowd, in order to bounce back our legendary that we just saw earlier before. Overall, I think this card has potential, but I don't know where it fits currently in standard. But since we are talking about outcasts, the next one is going to be Midnight Wolf, a 6-cost 6-attack 6 HP beast. Rush, outcast, summon a copy of this. Demon Hunter doesn't really have too many ways to buff up minions in the hand, which means a card like this isn't going to have insane value in Demon Hunter, and this feels just a little bit out of place compared to some of the other cards we'll be going over, including the next package, which is going to be Nagas. The first one is a Blind Eye Sharpshooter, which is a 3-cost 1-attack 5 HP Naga, that after you play a Naga, deal 2 damage to a random enemy, and draw a spell. Then switch, which if you're a fan of Naga Mage, this will mean after you play a spell, then draw a Naga and deal 2 damage to another random enemy. Overall, this card is probably a worse Siren from Mage. However, it is incredibly flavorful and probably will see some type of play if we do see a Naga Demon Hunter deck come into fruition, and there is a lot of great support for this deck, such as the next card, which is going to be Load the Chamber, a 3-cost fell spell that deals 2 damage. Your next Naga fell spell and weapon costs 1 less. That's a lot of mana cheat on a 3-mana card. Sure, this is a little bit weaker than the previous 3 damage that we saw with Pocket Sand. However, because this does allow you to play a lot of cards at the same time for cheaper, this could be more easily abused, especially given the fact that it does have a fail tag on it, thus making me think this will probably see a lot of play. Now for the next card, which is going to be Parch Desperado, a 2-cost 3-attack 2 HP Naga. Battlecry, if you've cast a spell while holding this, give your hero +3 attack this turn. Now, this in combination with a lot of the other cards that we have just went over is incredibly strong. We also have things like Momentum that are currently in rotation, depending on how much you're going to be drawing using the first Naga that we went over today, and this card. Overall, this is probably something that we'll see a lot of play because the condition is incredibly easy to fulfill. Now let's get onto the next Demon Hunter card, which is going to be Oasis Outlaws, which is a 1-cost spell that discovers a Naga. If you've played a Naga while holding this, reduce its cost by 1. The previous Naga that we went over is one of the better targets for this card. However, we do have a large package. There are quite a few Nagas, weirdly enough, in Demon Hunter, which is really cool. It does fit into the class fantasy pretty well. I am a little bit scared of Lady Cynthia with this card in combination. Sure, she's going to have a lower attack than she used to, but this could be ways to get more consistent copies. There are a few of these cards that are kind of dead if you do randomly generate them, but overall, a discoverability tool for a new type of Demon Hunter deck is always welcomed. And now for the capstone legendary for the Naga Demon Hunter deck. Snake Eyes, a 3-cost 2-attack 3 HP Naga. Battlecry, roll 2 dice, then discover 2 cards of those costs. Doubles get an extra discover, so you can get 3 cards for the price of 1 if you get a double. This is the first case of die in Hearthstone, which is weird that it's in Demon Hunter and not Rogue, because in Warcraft, Outlaw Rogue is centered around Roll the Bones, which is literally a roll the dice to get a bunch of random buffs. This is a cool effect. It gives you a lot of different cards that you can randomly generate. You're not going to be generating the most consistent cards, but because it is a lot of advantage off of a minion that can easily be discovered through other means itself, should allow this to be seen some type of play in a aggro Naga Demon Hunter list that we saw originally when Sunken City first came out. Now, let's get onto the mage cards. The first one we're going to be going over is Tae'thelan Bloodwatcher, a 4-cost 2-attack 5 HP minion. Cards that didn't start in your deck cost 4 less, but not less than 1. This is an effect that a lot of people are asking to be on every single card that can reduce costs down to 0. But in my opinion, that makes the game a little less interesting, and there's a lot less wacky things you can pull off, and I love pulling off wacky combos. However, I will say this card does have the potential of still making your cards cost 0 if you slam this down before you use another discount. Overall, there's a few homes that I could easily see this fitting in. Elemental Mage, while it doesn't look like a card for that deck, could easily get a lot of minions slammed down on the board really quickly using this. Rainbow Mage also can easily get a bunch of additional advantage off of it through things like Energy Shaper or even Discovery of Magic. There's a lot of possibilities with this card, but let's get on to some spells. The first one is going to be Sunset Volley, a 10-cost spell that has the fire tag. Deal 10 damage, randomly split among all enemies. Summon a random 10-cost minion. And there's only a few 10-cost minions within standard rotation right now. Most of these are really big statted bodies. However, there's one in particular that is going to be incredibly frustrating for your opponent to randomly generate against you, aka Thaddeus. This could, in theory, just allow your opponent to slam down a bunch of other spells that you have in their hand for free once they use this volley. This is basically a worse Alistair, but in spell form instead, which might make it a little bit more abusable in Mage. But honestly, if the pool remains this small for 10-cost minions, then I honestly could see where this just sees play to try to get out a free Thaddeus here or there, or even some of the other really good statted minions out of this pool. Now it's about time to overflow with Elemental Mage. Overflow Search, a 4-cost 3-attack 2 HP elemental. Battlecry, summon a copy of this for each turn in a row you've played at Elemental. This is the perfect swarming card for Elemental Mage. It has a pretty weak body, which makes it a little bit worse. However, if you find ways to increase the stat lines of this could be incredibly strong through things like Lothamar or even random generation off of Discovery of Magic. Continuing on our random mage theme, Stargazing is a 2-cost arcane spell. Draw a different arcane spell. If you played this turn, it casts twice. This is perfect for Light Show Mage. We've only been missing 1 or 2 really good cards to make that deck fully functional, and this is the perfect card to do so. Now for the next card, Heat Wave, a 2-cost spell that has the fire tag. Deal 2 damage to an enemy minion and its neighbors. Quickdraw to all enemies instead, which means it can actually hit your opponent's face. Now, first thought is, in combination with Sif, this is great. However, you have to play at the same turn you draw into it, which might not always happen with Sif, and there are just better face damaging tools for you to run. Now, let's get on to basically the only big package that Mage has access to in this set, Excavate. The first one is going to be Cryopreservation, a 2-cost frost spell, freeze an enemy, excavate a treasure, and we've seen the final Excavate reward for Mage, which is going to be the Jarn Hawk, which is a 4-cost, 5-attack, 5 elemental beast. Battlecry, get a random Titan. It costs 1. Mana cheat on a stick for some of the most powerful minions in the entire game. The majority of Titans that currently exist are incredibly strong. This is very flavorable because Azurite is the blood of Azeroth, which is also a Titan. Overall, I think this might be the weakest out of the 3 excavating rewards that we've seen so far, but that doesn't really change the fact that it is still incredibly strong. Now for the other excavating card, Reliquary Researcher, a 4-cost, 3-attack, 5 HP minion. Battlecry, if you've excavated twice, cast 2 random mage secrets. Honestly, out of all the classes so far with Excavate, I think the mage package feels the most out of place. It doesn't feel consistent with whatever they're trying to do with mage. A lot of the cards in mage this set feel really inconsistent, or at least don't work well with each other. I always do love trying to make secret mage work just because I do have a soft spot for secrets. But given the new secret that we have been introduced to, Azurite Vein within the set, which is a 3-cost spell that has the secret ability of when the enemy plays a card on the turn that it enters their hand, get a copy that costs 0. Honestly, this is probably one of the worst secrets we've seen in a long time, and because of which, I don't really know what decks to try out first with Mage. I think Casino Rainbow Mage is probably the only deck that got good enough support for you to try something with, but who knows? We are still missing a legendary, and that could always change.